when you ride a step up, it just teaches you how to develop a super strong base, and it also teaches you how to use your rail properly. If you look at a lot of surfers, and I think it just all depends with your goals. A lot of people just want to go out and have fun, and that's cool. But if you have the goal of actually progressing, you're like, man, I want to, do a big wrap or big carve or off the top. It really just kind of stems down to just really detailed basics, and it's just knowing how to use your rail. So when you use a bigger board, you can't really surf flat. Like you try surf flat or do a turn, like try and turn a big board. You're not going to be able to just flick it out. You know what I mean? You're either going to fall off the rail because your base and it's just kind of like takes time to get used to.
Right.
Or you're just going to kind of slowly turn, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, with that being said, my whole theory behind it, it's not even just a theory. I guess it's just more so like my years of experience. I just truly enjoy riding bigger boards, to be honest, too. But with that being said, when you use a bigger board, you develop a better base, and then you also learn how to use your rail line properly. And then it kind of just transfers over to all your boards. You know what I mean? But that's my whole like outlook on like riding step ups. It just dials your fundamentals in.
And do you think that that's a common issue for a lot of intermediate surfers, say, who ride smaller boards and do these flicky turns? Because a lot of times, because the board is lighter and more maneuverable, you think you're doing a turn just because you're able to like change the direction, but really you're just like, it's not actually engaging the rail. Is that kind of what you're saying there?
Yeah, I would say a lot of the time, especially if you're kind of just getting into it for a while, let's say you're just surfing for a year, and you're, let's say you're a pretty athletic person, you have good balance, maybe you skate, maybe you snowboard, whatever, you kind of learn pretty fast. Weight does come into play with certain things, especially if you're just starting out. But if you're just kind of like, in good shape, whatever, and you jump on your smaller fish boards, let's say you rode like an 8-foot board for a bit, and you kind of went down. Yeah, you get a false sense of like, I guess, direction when it comes to fundamentals, because you're turning. Also, like, I watched one of your podcasts, but it is super true. If you don't really ever watch yourself surf, you do get like a full, like, you have no idea what you look like. We dealt with that when I was super young. Like, we used to like film each other, but if you don't watch yourself surf, that's probably one of, I'm like jumping ahead, but I would say that is like essential of getting better, is being able to critique and watch yourself surf. Super important. It's like common sense, but it's actually like underrated. People don't really realize that, but it is. But yeah, people tend to surf real flat because it's the boards are shorter, depending on what you ride. It's easier to force turns.
Yeah. And
what happens is like, we all kind of dealt with it at some point in our life, but it's super hard when you start developing like bad habits to break out of it. So I would say, I actually said this in one of my videos, if I were to ever coach a kid, like from real young, I would have them on like a step up board to just build a good base, get their like basic fundamentals, using their rail line, cutbacks, also like it teaches you how to flow. It actually teaches you how to pump better, because it's super easy to kind of like, I call it like tic-tac-toe, when you're just like papping on a board. Yeah. On a big board, you literally have to pump correctly from your hits.
Right.
Right. So
to do those big swoops, because you can't.
Exactly.
There's just too much foam. Yeah.
Yeah. You actually have to, you're pretty much going like, it's like knee to chest. You're almost like just dropping, but it really shows you how to use your rail line properly. And in order to actually gain speed, if you look at some of the best surfers in the world, they're never like, Jack Robinson actually, Jack Robinson does this super good. He stands out to me, but if you ever see him surf Huntington Beach, when he is like ever pumping into that, what do they call it, the Huntington hop, he's always S-turning. He just goes rail to rail. And when you ride a big board, you have to pump like that. Otherwise, you just really don't get speed, especially if you're surfing a smaller wave, you know?
Well, so here's a question, because I watched you on one of those, and it seemed like what was really interesting is, because one of the issues with the bigger board is when you pop up, a lot of times you're more in the middle of the board. But I saw you popped up, your back foot was like all the way on the back. It almost seemed like you didn't even have to adjust it.
Yeah.
But I'm like, how are you doing that on a 7.4? How are you doing that on a 7.0? Like, is the wide point back? Are you like sitting a little further back and sacrificing some wave catching ability? Or is it just, you just know to step like all the way back when you do it? Or any tips there?
Yeah, no. So, you know, that's actually a good question. I've never actually paid attention to like how, where I'm laying on the board, like appropriately for how the length of the board is. So like depending on if I'm on a short board, I'd be laying centered on the short board. If I'm on a little bigger board, I'm just kind of like centered for that length. But, you know, I was saying this, and it's crazy because if you look at my board up here, can you see this?
You can't see it all, but
okay. So like, okay, if you know, like the quarter back end of a surfboard,
right?
If you think about it, you know, obviously you have your front foot comes into play a lot, but more so of the performance, like your turns and your like your off the top turns, your carves. It's like you're almost like driving stick. It's like driving manual. You know what I mean? You're releasing a little pressure off your front foot, and then you're engaging like the gas with your back foot. And that's like with a bigger board, people get this false perception of like, if there's way more rail line on it, it's like you're thinking like, oh, I'm using so much more of this rail line. But honestly, when I ride a bigger board, the only difference is, especially in like small waves, it's just like getting in real tight in the pockets as for like a short board. But everything else feels exactly like the same, like carves, pumpings, like tight wraps. You know, if the wave is like shoulder to head high, you should have no problem doing like all those turns on a bigger wave. But my stance, it's pretty much the same, like as on if I'm on a short board. Really, I'm not like
you don't have to shuffle back intentionally to get back there, because I feel like, you know, the wide point is going to be further forward just because it's a longer board.
Yeah, I feel you. Yeah, that's actually a good observation. So I, like, if you're talking about it, I think when I'm standing up, I probably do at the last like second, just subtly throw myself a little bit more on the back end versus popping up right in the middle. So I see what you're saying. Probably just a little, without even, see, that's crazy because without even like thinking about that, yeah, I probably do just like a little bit, like last second pop up, just throw myself subtly in the back. Micro inches. Crazy. Yeah. It's a big difference.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, it's when you've been, so many things in surfing are just like intuitive that you don't even think about it. And if you're doing it right, you don't have to think about it. But if you're doing it wrong, you know.
No, that's a great question. I've actually no, totally. And I've never been, I never thought about that specific question. Like, are you popping up right in the middle, or are you like swooping back a little bit? Yeah, I probably am, like just a little bit, just to get in the sweet spot, you know?
Yeah. Interesting. And so, you know, I guess if the board is 19 inches wide, you know, and it's fairly thin, because if it's 33 liters at that length, it's going to be fairly thin. Then engaging the rail, like doing a turn is going to feel fairly similar to a short board, except the, I guess there's just going to be a little bit more swing weight in the front, right?
Yes.
Influence things.
Which I love that. I love the weight in the front. So a lot of people, they don't like all that nose, Sorry, you just brought that up, and that made me think. I actually, personally, like, without even really saying it so much, like even talking to someone about it, I like for swooping round turns, I like the weight. Like just having that extra length, it almost like gives it that little extra difference between like using a rail to like true, I guess you could say like true power surfing.